When the Montgomery family learned that someone had asked for their troublesome, plain daughter's hand in marriage, they shipped her off like trash cruelly and efficiently, never realizing they were delivering precisely the rare treasure a wealthy rancher had been praying to find. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a mailman who could barely hide a sly grin. He knew exactly what that envelope meant in Willow Creek. Everyone did, when he placed the paper in the hands of Charles Montgomery, the family patriarch. Charles cracked the seal with the curiosity of a man expecting more news and found something better, an opportunity made of gold. Jonathan Pierce Sullivan, the most prosperous rancher in the neighboring Red Rock County, was asking for the hand of one of the Montgomery daughters. The man had built a ranching empire from nothing. He owned more acres than any other landowner within 60 miles, and his reputation for honest, relentless work echoed through every small town for counties around. He was the kind of son-in-law any family would dream of. The problem? Jonathan had asked for Mary Claire specifically. Charles called his wife Helen and their two eldest daughters into the living room. Beatrice, the firstborn at 26, sat with the impeccable posture she had practiced since childhood. Isabella, at 24, smoothed her dress with the effortless elegance that always seemed to follow her. They were the pride of the family, beautiful, well-mannered, obedient, the very picture of marriageable. Any sensible man would have chosen one of them. "Read this," Charles said, passing the letter along with a smile that never reached his eyes. Helen read aloud, and with each sentence her smile grew in a way that felt almost unsettling. The sisters exchanged puzzled looks until their mother reached the line where Jonathan explicitly named Mary Claire as his chosen bride. The silence shattered under Beatrice's laughter. Isabella quickly joined, and within seconds the whole room rang with mirth that had nothing joyful about it. Cruel laughter, slick with the morbid satisfaction only truly mean-spirited people can savor. "He asked for Mary Claire," Helen repeated, as if she needed to confirm the words. "The richest, most respected rancher around asked for our Mary Claire. This is perfect," Charles said, clapping once. "Simply perfect. If you're new here and not part of our family yet, subscribe. That's how we keep telling stories that stir the heart and make you think about life. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We love to see how far our stories travel." Mary Claire wasn't in the room for that conversation. She was in the back of the house, tending to her ailing grandmother, the way she had every day since the old woman fell ill. Mary Claire always took on the hardest responsibilities, the care no one else wanted, the chores that stained your hands or demanded patience. While she pressed cool cloths to her grandmother's forehead, she heard the laughter drifting from the front room. Her family mocking her wasn't unusual, but this sounded different, sharper, more calculated. She knew that tone. It was the sound they made when they were plotting something unkind. The truth about Mary Claire Montgomery was too complicated for her family's shallow perceptions. At 23, she wasn't a problem because she was rebellious in the usual sense, but because she possessed something far more dangerous, an unshakable sense of justice and the courage to act on it. 3 years earlier, when she discovered the local judge was taking bribes to favor land grabbers, Mary Claire gathered evidence and turned it over to the proper authorities. The scandal cost the Montgomerys several lucrative deals that depended on that corruption. Charles never forgave her. The next year, she exposed a scheme where shopkeepers spiked prices on staple foods during the dry season to exploit desperate families. Again, her intervention cost the Montgomerys money. They had a quiet stake in those inflated profits. The pattern repeated. Mary Claire saw injustice, investigated it, and corrected it, and moved by what it did to the family's wallet. For the Montgomerys, who built wealth in the gray space between the law and convenience, a daughter with a moral spine was a constant nightmare. But there was another reason their laughter tasted so triumphant. In their eyes, Mary Claire was unfit for any prestigious match. While her sisters displayed the delicate beauty society loved, Mary Claire carried a sturdier frame, work-hardened hands, and a face often set in expressions of determination her mother called too masculine. What they could not or would not see was that her physical strength mirrored a deeper strength of character. The calluses told the story of an honest worker. That determined brow belonged to someone incapable of letting injustice slide. And it was precisely that character that had caught Jonathan Pierce Sullivan's attention 5 years earlier, in a moment that would quietly redirect both their lives. On a Saturday morning, the weekly market in St. John's Valley, a modest town a few counties over, bustled with voices and footsteps. Vendors barked prices. Children weaved between stalls. The scent of kettle coffee mingled with warm molasses from fresh taffy. Jonathan had arrived early to stock his ranch, but a commotion near the livestock pen froze him in place. A squat merchant was shouting at a frail, barefoot old man, accusing him of trying to steal a hen. The elder, shaking, ashamed, insisted he had merely touched the bird to check its health before making an offer. The merchant, known around those parts for preying on the vulnerable, was putting on a show to scare off the poor from haggling. Jonathan felt anger rise. Before he could step in, someone else did. A young woman, Plain dress, clean but simple, hands that knew work stepped between the merchant and the old man. "Stop. Right now," she said. Her voice was steady and clear, the kind of authority that makes a crowd hush. "Who are you to order me around?" The merchant snapped, but there was doubt in his tone. "I am the person who has watched this stall for the last 10 minutes, she replied, arms crossed. "This gentleman touched the hen for 3 seconds, asked the price, and when you quoted double the usual rate, he thanked you and stepped back. He never tried to take a thing." Murmurs rippled. A few bystanders confirmed her account. The merchant's grip on the moment faltered. Then the young woman did something that stunned Jonathan. She drew a small purse from her dress, counted bills, and held them out. "How much for the hen?" $2,000, the merchant smirked, thrown off by the turn. She placed the money in his palm without blinking. "Then the hen is mine." She turned and offered the bird to the old man. "For you, sir, for your family." He tried to refuse through tears. She insisted gently, until he accepted, clutching the bird as if it were treasure. By then, 2 well-dressed young women, obviously her sisters, arrived, faces flushed with embarrassment and irritation. "Mary Claire, what have you done now?" the older scolded. "Only what was right," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "You spent family money on a stranger. Father will be furious. Then I will explain it to him," she answered, calm as a bell. They dragged her away, muttering about improper behavior and troublemaking. Jonathan watched her go, noticed the unbowed tilt of her chin, the absence of regret. In that moment, a rare flame sparked in him. He had just witnessed a person who moved when conscience commanded, regardless of cost. Later that day, discreet questions gave names. The polished beauties were Beatrice and Isabella Montgomery. The difficult one was Mary Claire, admired by working folks for quiet kindnesses, despised by the powerful for inconvenient honesty. From that day on, Mary Claire never left Jonathan's thoughts. Years passed, 5 of them, until Jonathan sat on his ranch porch in Red Rock County, staring at a blank page. At 32, he had more than many men amass in a lifetime: a thriving herd, sound books, and a house too big for one man. Whenever he imagined marriage, only one face rose in his mind: the young woman from St. John's Valley who stood between cruelty and a defenseless man. He wrote carefully. He introduced himself properly, named his holdings, and without revealing the market memory, formally requested the hand of Mary Claire Montgomery. He spoke sincerely of wanting a partner who valued honesty and integrity as fiercely as he did. When Charles Montgomery's reply arrived 3 days later, quick, eager, unnaturally brief, Jonathan felt a flicker of unease. The family accepted with enthusiasm, confirmed that Mary Claire was eager to meet him, and suggested she travel the following Monday. The haste scraped wrong, as if they were desperate to send her off. Perhaps there was an illness he did not know, or a recent scandal. But then he remembered the woman who bought a hen to shield a stranger, and decided he would face whatever came. On Monday, he would finally learn if 5 years of hope had been well placed. Back in Willow Creek, the Montgomerys refined their scheme with military neatness. Charles paced, hands clasped behind his back, a cruel smile spreading. Helen reread Jonathan's letter for the 3rd time, as if afraid to wake from such perfect fortune. 5 years, Charles muttered. 5 years of her messing our arrangements. And now a man shows up asking for her by name. "Do you think he knows about the incidents?" Beatrice asked, tucking a blonde strand behind her ear. "Impossible," Helen said. "He lives 2 towns away. If he knew her reputation, he would never ask." From the window, Isabella watched Mary Claire hanging laundry. "Look at her, always working, always serious. No man here wanted her. That rancher has no idea what he is getting." "Which is exactly why this is perfect," Charles said, striking the table with his fist. "He expects a docile, polished wife." Imagine his surprise. Their plan was simple and vicious. Accept the match. Stay silent about Mary Claire's true nature. Let the man discover it too late. Then she would be his problem, not theirs. And best of all, she would be far enough away to stop interfering with their business. Outside the door, Mary Claire leaned against the wall, laundry forgotten, heart pounding so hard she feared they could hear it. His problem, not ours. Too late. A blessing. The words hit like stones on water, spreading rings of cold realization. For 23 years she had tried to earn their love, caring for her grandmother, taking the hardest tasks, biting her tongue. None of it ever mattered. Her unforgivable sin was having a conscience. Tears came not of sadness, but of a fierce, painful release. If they were so desperate to be rid of her, she would make their punishment her victory. She would not arrive as a victim, but as a woman who finally understood her worth. If Jonathan met the real Mary Claire and rejected her, at least she would have her dignity. That Monday dawned under a gray sky that matched the mood in the Montgomery house. Mary Claire had slept poorly for 5 nights, packing a small, worn suitcase that once belonged to her grandmother. She owned few clothes. Her family never invested in her wardrobe the way they did for the others, but each piece was clean and neatly pressed. Downstairs, breakfast passed in choreographed quiet. Only her grandmother squeezed her hand with a tremble and whispered, "You will be happy, child. Good hearts always find their place." At 8 o'clock sharp, A hired carriage rolled up. Charles kissed her cheek with a performance of tenderness. Helen told her to write in a tone that made it clear she did not care if a letter ever came. Beatrice and Isabella waved from the porch, smiles too bright to be honest. Mary Claire climbed in without looking back. As the scenery shifted from modest farms to thriving spreads, Mary Claire felt a knot of questions tighten. Why had Jonathan chosen her? Did he not know what people whispered? Either he would discover an unpleasant truth soon enough, or just maybe he already knew and had reasons of his own. When the carriage turned up the lane of the Sullivan Ranch, she caught her breath. The place was impressive but not ostentatious. Strong timber, a wide porch, barns laid out with practical sense. A man stepped from the house to greet her, taller than she remembered. Broad-shouldered from years of real work, sun-marked skin, a few gray threads at his temples. But it was his eyes, steady, intelligent, that told her the truth. He knew her. He had known her since that market. "Miss Mary Claire," he said, voice low and warm. "Welcome to Sullivan Ranch." "Thank you for receiving me, Mr. Sullivan," she replied, dipping her head. He took her suitcase, gestured toward the porch. "You must be tired from the road. Come in, we can talk where it's comfortable." Inside, the sitting room was simple and welcoming, solid wood, a few well-loved books, a quiet fire. He poured coffee into delicate china she would not have expected in a ranch house. They sat with a respectful space between them.
How was your trip?
He asked. "Uneventful, thank you," she said, hands wrapped around the cup for steadiness. "Your property is beautiful. It must have taken years." 10 years, he answered with a modest pride. "I bought this land when it was nearly worthless. We built everything piece by piece." She nodded, impressed. "People who work can see the work in what's been built. It must be gratifying to watch it grow under your hands." "It is," he said. "But a place this size calls for a family. A big house without people is still just a big empty house." Silence settled. Mary Claire placed the cup down on its saucer. "Time for truth. Mr. Sullivan, may I ask a direct question?" "Please do. Why did you ask for me specifically?" "My sisters are more, what the world calls suitable. Any sensible man would have chosen one of them." He considered her for a long moment, then decided, "May I be just as direct?" "Please. Because I saw you in St. John's Valley 5 years ago. I saw what you did for an old man who was being shamed in public. I saw you spend your own money to protect him. You expected nothing back. I have thought of that woman ever since." Blood rose to her cheeks. "You were there?" "I was. And I have spent 5 years wondering if the woman I saw was as brave as I believed." He leaned forward. "Miss Mary Claire, I do not want a decorative wife. I want a partner with the moral courage to do what is right, even when it is hard." His words struck like lightning through a life of criticism. The traits her family punished, he praised. "You should know," she said, steadying herself. "My family thinks I am a problem. They sent me here to be rid of me, a burden traded away, not a gift offered." "I suspected as much," he answered calmly. Their quick acceptance said plenty. "And knowing that, you still wish to marry me?" He stood, walked to the window, looked out over pastures that seemed to breathe. "May I tell you something about myself? In the last 10 years, I could have married a dozen women, beautiful, respectable, sensible choices. But whenever I tried to imagine it, I saw the young woman in the market standing up for a stranger. No one else measured up to that memory. You do not truly know me," she whispered. "Then let us fix that," he said, turning back. "Let us spend a few weeks. No pressure, no impossible expectations, getting to know each other. If at the end we find we are truly compatible, we will marry. If not, I will help you find a situation that honors who you are, whether that is returning to your kin or something entirely different." The generosity of it stole her breath. "You would do that? Even if I chose not to marry you, I would. A woman of your character deserves choices, not a shove from one unhappy fate to another." For the first time in years, Mary Claire felt something she had nearly forgotten: hope. "If I accept," she said carefully, "do you promise I can be completely honest about who I am, even if some truths trouble you?" "Especially then," he said. "Lies are a terrible foundation for anything, least of all a marriage." She drew a long breath. "Then I accept, with one condition." "What is it?" "That you are just as honest with me about your hopes, your fears, your expectations. If we are to know each other truly, it must go both ways." He smiled, his first genuine smile since she arrived. "Agreed." He offered his arm. "Shall we start with a walk of the ranch? I would like to show you everything and hear your unfiltered thoughts." She stood, lighter than she had felt in years. "I should warn you, I have thoughts about many things." "Good," he said. "I was counting on that." They stepped into the afternoon together. Her family had tried to dispose of a defect. Instead, they had delivered a rare gem into the hands of a man wise enough to see it shine. The weeks that followed felt like a long, gentle sunrise in Mary Claire's life. For the first time, she lived in a place where her thoughts weren't treated as trouble but as treasures. Each morning, she and Jonathan rode out to the pastures together, talking about the ranch, about people, about life. He had promised honesty, and he kept that promise in every word. He told her about his dreams, expanding the ranch, building a small school for the workers' children, making sure no one on his land went hungry again. She shared her ideas for improving the irrigation system, based on her childhood memories of poor families struggling through droughts. What if we built connected cisterns, she suggested one afternoon, shading her eyes against the sun, enough to hold water through the dry months, so the cattle and the people never suffer. Jonathan stopped walking, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Because you think like a man who's always had water, she replied softly. I think like someone who's watched people beg for it. He laughed, not offended but impressed. That was what set her apart. She didn't just see land or numbers, she saw lives. Every improvement she proposed was rooted in compassion. Their bond grew in the rhythm of work and conversation. At dusk, they'd sit on the porch, the sky burning orange over Red Rock County, and talk until the stars came out. Those moments stripped away the walls between them. Tell me about your family, Jonathan said one evening, his tone careful but curious. Mary Claire hesitated, then kept her promise of honesty. They see me as a mistake, she said simply. Someone born wrong, too loud, too opinionated, too unwilling to pretend. What kind of wrong? He asked quietly. The kind that cares too much about people who can't pay for kindness. My mother says a lady should be seen, not heard. My father says a woman's place is to smile and stay quiet, but I can't do that. I never could. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment before answering. You know the difference between you and your sisters? He said finally. They decorate a room. You transform it. She blinked, unsure she heard right. They add beauty, he continued, but you bring meaning. That's rarer and far more powerful. His words sank deep, like rain on dry soil. For the first time in her life, someone didn't ask her to be less. Someone saw her to muteness as exactly enough. Days turned into weeks. Their respect grew into admiration, and admiration slowly ignited into something warmer. The air between them began to hum in the pauses, in the looks that lasted a little longer than they should, in the brush of hands passing tools or coffee cups. One night as they walked through the quiet garden under the stars, Jonathan stopped. I didn't plan to say this so soon, he began, his voice low, but I'm falling in love with you, Mary Claire. Not the memory of you from 5 years ago, but the woman you are right now. Her breath caught. Jonathan, he raised a hand gently. You don't have to say it back. We promise no pressure. But she shook her head. It's not pressure. It's truth. She smiled faintly. I'm falling in love with your kindness, with your honesty, with how you make me feel safe just being myself. He took a step closer. May I? Instead of answering, she rose on her toes, meeting his lips halfway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, searching. Then it deepened into something that spoke of gratitude and recognition, of two souls who'd wandered too long alone. When they finally broke apart, neither could stop smiling. Marry me, he whispered against her hair. Not because our families arranged it, because I can't imagine this life without you. Yes, she breathed. 1,000 times yes. That night, lying awake in the guest room Jonathan had prepared for her, Mary Claire stared at the ceiling, her heart full. 3 weeks earlier, she had been the unwanted daughter, a burden sent away like refuse. Now she was the chosen heart of a man who loved her precisely for what made others reject her. Her parents thought they were sending her to humiliation. Instead, they had handed her happiness. The wedding came on a bright Saturday morning in Red Rock County's small church. The ceremony was simple. White flowers, sunlight through stained glass, the faint scent of cedar in the air. Mary Claire wore a blue gown that Jonathan had chosen, soft and elegant, the color of calm skies. The Montgomerys didn't come. They sent only a cold letter of congratulations. She read it once, then tossed it into the fire without a flicker of emotion. That chapter of her life had ended. Instead, the pews were filled with workers from the ranch, their families, and townspeople who loved them both. When Jonathan promised to honor and cherish her for life, his voice trembled with emotion. When Mary Claire vowed to be his loyal partner and honest friend, she felt strength surge through her like sunlight. They weren't two strangers tied by convenience anymore. They were partners, equals, choosing each other freely. The celebration lasted until moonrise. Laughter, music, and joy spilled from every corner of the ranch. And amid all the dancing and the toasts, Mary Claire felt a peace she'd never known. But peace has a way of being tested. 3 months later, a familiar carriage appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Mary Claire was gathering wildflowers for the table when she saw it. Her heart skipped. Her father, Charles, stepped down, hat in hand, his face pale, eyes uneasy. Jonathan came out to stand beside his wife. Father, Mary Claire said evenly, what brings you here? Charles looked around the flourishing ranch, the organized corrals, the new school for workers' children, the prosperity everywhere. I came to talk business, he said, clearing his throat. What kind of business? Jonathan asked, his arms steady around her waist. The judge back in Willow Creek has been arrested. Several families are being investigated for land fraud. We may face Difficulties, I see, Mary Claire said, already knowing where this was going. We were hoping, Charles continued, that you might persuade your husband to help us, maybe financially, just until things settle. The silence that followed was sharp. Mary Claire looked at the man who had once called her a burden. Her voice was calm, but every word carried years of truth. All my life, she said, you told me I was a problem, that my conscience was a flaw. You sent me here thinking it was punishment. And now, when you need help, I'm suddenly worth something. Mary Claire, we are still your family, he said weakly. She shook her head. No, father. A family loves, protects, values. You discarded me, and in doing so, you gave me the greatest gift of all. Jonathan squeezed her hand, silent, proud. I won't help you, she said finally. Not because I want revenge, but because saving you would mean helping you continue the same corruption I spent my life fighting. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Charles turned red with anger. After everything we did for you, for me, she interrupted. You made me feel broken for having principles. You punished me for defending others, and you sent me away thinking you were ruining my life. But look around, father. You didn't ruin it. You made it possible. Charles glared at Jonathan. And you'll let your wife speak to her father like this? Jonathan smiled, calm but cold. Mr. Montgomery, that's why I married her, because she has the courage you tried to crush. Charles left fuming, muttering that they'd regret it. The carriage disappeared down the long, dusty road. Mary Claire turned to Jonathan, emotion filling her chest. Did I do the right thing? He kissed her forehead. You did the only thing that fits who you are, and I love you even more for it. That night, as they dined by the glow of lanterns, Mary Claire looked across the table at the man fate had led her to. Her family had tried to cast her out like refuse, but in doing so, they had guided her home. Do you know what's funny? She said softly. They thought they were punishing you, giving you the flawed daughter to ruin your life. Jonathan laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the room. And they'll never realize they gave me the rarest treasure I could ever find. Mary Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Sometimes, she thought, life's greatest blessings come disguised as heartbreak. And sometimes, the people who try to hurt us only end up steering us toward our true destiny. That night, hand in hand, Mary Claire and Jonathan watched the moon rise over their land, a land built on honesty, love, and the quiet courage of two souls who had finally found their home. Years passed on the Sullivan Ranch, and the world around Mary Claire and Jonathan seemed to move at its own gentler rhythm. What had begun as a story of rejection and irony became a legacy whispered through every valley and hill of Red Rock County. Under their care, the ranch grew not only in size but in soul. Workers spoke of them not as employers but as family. Children who once chased cattle barefoot were now learning to read in the small schoolhouse. Mary Claire had designed herself a modest white building near the oak grove with a handmade bell that rang every morning. One afternoon, as she watched the children laughing outside, Mary Claire felt a warmth rise inside her chest. She turned to Jonathan, who was leaning on the fence beside her, eyes soft with pride. Do you ever think about how far we've come? She asked. Every day, he said, smiling. And every day I thank the heavens your family made the worst decision of their lives. She laughed that full, real laughter she'd once been afraid to let out. Funny how cruelty can turn into grace. He nodded. They thought they were throwing you away, but they threw you straight into my arms. Their life together wasn't perfect. There were seasons of drought, losses, and nights when the weight of responsibility felt heavy. But through every hardship, Mary Claire stood beside Jonathan, her strength steady as the land itself. It was her who organized aid for nearby farmers during the drought of year 21, convincing wealthier landowners to pool resources. It was her who insisted on fair pay for workers long before the idea was popular. And it was Jonathan, always, who supported her, never silencing her voice but amplifying it. Word of the Sullivans' kindness spread far beyond Red Rock County. People began visiting from neighboring states, Texas, Kansas, New Mexico, to learn how they managed to run a profitable ranch while treating everyone with respect. Some came curious, others skeptical, but all left changed. One evening, years later, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields gold, a young journalist from Chicago arrived. He wanted to write an article about the lady who changed the prairie. He found Mary Claire sitting on the porch mending a child's blanket while Jonathan repaired a saddle beside her. Mrs. Sullivan, the young man began, people say your story started as a tragedy. Do you see it that way? Mary Claire smiled gently, her eyes distant with memory. No, she said. It started as a lie, but it became the truth I was meant to live. And your family? He asked cautiously. She looked toward the horizon. They gave me the greatest gift without knowing it. Freedom. Freedom to become who I was meant to be. He nodded, scribbling quickly, clearly moved. Before he left, Jonathan walked him to his carriage. Write it right, he said with a wink. Don't make it sound like a fairy tale. Make sure they know she built this with grit, not luck. That article, titled The Woman Who Turned Rejection into a Revolution, would later appear in several newspapers across the Midwest. It spoke of Mary Claire Sullivan, once mocked as a misfit daughter, now admired as a symbol of courage, integrity, and hope. The years flowed like river water. The small school grew into a local academy. The children who had learned to read under Mary Claire's roof grew into teachers, nurses, and ranchers themselves. And though she never sought praise, her name became quietly legendary, not for wealth, but for compassion. When Charles Montgomery passed away years later, the news reached Red Rock County through a telegram. Mary Claire read it in silence, then folded the paper neatly and set it aside. Jonathan touched her shoulder. "Do you want to go back?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "There's nothing back there to return to. Everything I ever needed is right here," and she was right. Her home was not a house or a family name. It was the life she had built with her own 2 hands, and the love that had taken root in the soil she once thought she'd never belong to. One crisp autumn morning, decades later, Mary Claire Sullivan sat once more on that same porch, the sound of children's laughter floating from the schoolyard nearby. Her hair was silver now, her hands still calloused, but her eyes shone with the same fire. Jonathan, older too, sat beside her, their fingers intertwined. "Do you ever regret anything?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "Only that I didn't learn sooner that being different isn't a curse. It's a calling." They watched the sun rise together over the golden fields. 2 souls who had turned rejection into purpose, cruelty into kindness, and a broken beginning into a life of meaning. And though their story began with a cruel letter, it ended with a truth that would echo for generations. Sometimes the world tries to throw away its brightest souls, but the right heart will always see their light. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it. Someone out there might need to be reminded that pain can lead to purpose, and that love always finds those who stay true to who they are.